Nancy Clancy, Super Sleuth. Book 1, excuse me. This is the continuation of Chapter 6. Dudes, listen to all the vivid words Nancy has used, Mr. Dudney said. Nancy read out loud to the class. She explained that priceless meant really expensive and maimed meant hurt. Then she said, at first, I was going to make the stolen ring be a diamond ring, but I changed it to a sapphire after seeing Mr. Dudney's beautiful blue marble. Hey, look, Grace said. In surprise, she was pointing to the mementos table. The crisscrossed pieces of tape were still stuck on the table, but the marble was gone. No worries, it must have gotten unstuck and rolled off, Mr. Dudney said. Let's search. Grace checked the wastebaskets. Yoko, Lionel, and Tamar went through the book bins in case the marble had dropped into one. Nancy and Bree searched under the radiators. Nancy saw a dead bug, but no marble. It's not in Eric Clapton's cage either, Clara said. I checked. Grace rolled her eyes. Clara, how could that huge marble get inside the hamster's cage? I don't know, but I checked anyway. Clara looked upset. How could it have disappeared? I'm sure it'll turn up, Mr. Dudney said. I think somebody stole it, Grace said in a low voice, so I think somebody stole it, Grace said in a low voice, so Mr. D couldn't hear. You think she's right? Nancy asked Bree. It does seem suspicious. Then our classroom might be a crime scene. This struck Nancy as both thrilling and upsetting. Right before going home, Bree aimed her camera at the mementos table. Maybe we can get the pictures back today. She paused and snapped her last picture. Who knows? There could be a clue. Ooh la la. Now Nancy and Bree had 2 mysteries to solve. The secret of the twins and the case of the missing marble. Chapter 7. Hunting for clues. Bree's mom came back with the photos late that afternoon. The girls looked through them at Sleuth headquarters. Bree giggled. Look at Lionel. Nancy was busy studying some other photos. I'm trying to establish the time of crime. In Sleuth talk, establishing meant figuring out something. These 2 photos are clues. Nancy handed Bree one of Bree's parents at the Nancy handed Bree one of Bree's parents at the display table. See the clock on the wall? Yeah. It says 11, Bree said. The blue marble is still there. Nancy held up a different photo. Now everybody except Bree was standing behind the display table. Mr. Dudney was in the photo too, but the marble was gone. Oh, I have goosebumps, Bree said. Me too. Too bad the clock got cut off on this one. Doesn't matter, Bree said. I remember I took it right after lunch. Lunch is over at 1:15, so that means the marble disappeared sometime between 11 and 1:15. Nancy heard herself and stopped. Oh, Bree, we are really sleuthing. Nancy Drew would be so proud. Bree flung her arms around Nancy. Partner, we are going to crack this case wide open. At dinner that evening, Nancy's dad said, My, just the other day you were complaining about the lack of crime around here. He paused to spoon some carrots onto his plate. And now look, grand theft at school. Doug, stop teasing, her mom said. Looks like an inside job to me, her dad went on, ignoring a loud sigh from her mom. I don't feel good. My tummy hurts. Jojo climbed into Mom's lap. Nancy's dad turned to her and said, So, was anybody ever alone in the classroom? Nancy had already thought about that. No, only Mr. Dudney. He stays while we're at recess. Doubtful he stole his own marble. Unless, of course, your teacher is losing his marbles. Her dad laughed at his own joke. Her mother shook her head and carried Jojo upstairs to lie down until she felt better. Chapter 8. Fingerprints. Later that evening, Nancy lay on her bed pondering. Pondering was like thinking, only fancier. Next to her on her night table was the witch tree symbol. How would Nancy Drew go about solving the case of a missing marble? She wondered. Nancy picked up the book and opened it. She didn't expect to find any answers in it. She just liked looking at the first page. In the top corner it said, Marjorie Sneff, in curly script. That had been Mrs. Devine's name when she was a child in the days of yore. Sacre bleu, Nancy said out loud in French that meant, oh my gosh. There was a dark brown fingerprint by Mrs. Devine's name. It had never been there before, and the page was torn. Jojo! Nancy hollered. She charged into her sister's room. Jojo was on the floor playing with all the things in her plastic treasure chest. Evidently, her tummy felt a little better. She was eating an Oreo. Dark brown crumbs were all over her mouth and fingers. She looked up, saw Nancy, and snapped her treasure chest shut. She had a guilty look on her face. You're not allowed to touch my stuff. Nancy shoved the open book at her sister. Look what you did. I didn't do that. You did too. Look at your hands. This fingerprint was made by someone eating an Oreo cookie. Quickly, Jojo hid her hands behind her back. It wasn't me. I don't like those books. They're scary. Nancy ran to find her mother. She was halfway down the hall when she stopped. Maybe Jojo was telling the truth. The covers of Nancy Drew books did scare her. Nancy examined the fingerprint in the book more closely. It was big. It was probably a thumbprint. Come with me, she told Jojo. They went into Nancy's room, Nancy took her sister's hand and pressed her thumb onto a page in her detective notepad. A brown thumbprint appeared. It was the same color as the thumbprint in the Nancy Drew book, but it was much smaller. Jojo was innocent after all. Sorry I blamed you, Nancy told her. That's okay, Jojo said. Will you read to me? Yeah, I guess. They went back to Jojo's room. Jojo pushed her treasure chest under the bed and found her favorite book. She handed it to Nancy. It was about a pirate ship and buried treasure. The whole time Nancy was reading, she kept thinking about the brown thumbprint in her book. Who besides Bree and Jojo had been in her room lately? Ooh la la, it hit her. The twins. They had come over a few days ago after soccer. Had Rhonda been eating anything chocolatey? No, Nancy didn't think so, but maybe the thumbprint wasn't chocolate. Maybe it was dirt. That made sense. Everybody came back from soccer all muddy. Nancy never would have let Rhonda touch the Nancy Drew book with dirty hands. So when did Rhonda commit the crime? Suddenly Nancy remembered. Mrs. Devine had called about coming for tea. While Nancy was on the phone, the twins were alone in her room. Double ooh la la. All the pieces of the puzzle were falling into place. Rhonda had probably picked up the Nancy Drew book just to look at it and messed it up by mistake. Rhonda was scared to confess, and so Rhonda made Wanda promise not to tell Nancy. It all made sense. Still, Nancy had no proof. On TV, detectives always talked about fingerprint files. If a fingerprint was found at the scene of a crime, they could match it up with one of the files. The trouble was, Nancy didn't have any other fingerprints of Rhonda's. Or did she? Rhonda had been at headquarters just yesterday. The glass of water. Nancy flew downstairs. Wait! You didn't finish, Jojo called. Nancy grabbed her trench coat and flashlight from the pantry. Her father was loading stuff into the dishwasher. Where are you going? To headquarters. I'll be right back. Outside, Nancy clicked on the flashlight. She made her way under the cover of darkness. Inside headquarters, the glow from the flashlight cast spooky shadows. There it was, the plastic glass with Tinker Bell on it. Nancy held it at the bottom so she wouldn't get her own prints on it. Once she was back in the kitchen, she put the Tinker Bell glass on a counter. Then she turned to her father. Dad, whatever you do, don't touch that glass. It's evidence. Whew, like you warned me, he said. There was no time for a special delivery mail basket. Nancy called Bree. She filled her in, then asked, see if your mom will let you come over and bring the kit. Bree's aunt had sent her a junior detective kit for her birthday. It had all sorts of superb stuff, including a bottle of fingerprint powder. This is so thrilling, Bea said as she burst into Clancy's kitchen. I can't believe we're going to dust for prints. Nancy's father stood by watching. Whatever it is, I swear I'm innocent. I'm a law-abiding man with a wife and children." "Very funny, Dad," Nancy said as he left the room. She put on a pair of yellow rubber kitchen gloves. There's This way no more prints will get on the glass. Very carefully she picked up the Tinkerbell glass. Bree sprinkled on some fingerprint powder. Sure enough, 5 white powdery fingerprints appeared. Bree was peering at the biggest one with the little magnifying glass from her kit. "Here's the thumbprint." They took the glass upstairs. Nancy showed Bree the brown fingerprint in her Nancy Drew book. "Now comes the test," Nancy said. Using her jeweled magnifying glass, she studied the thumbprints. "Definitely a match," Nancy said. "The thumbprints were identical. We have solved the secret of the twins, just like real detectives." Bree said, "So what happens next?" The answer was obvious. "We solved the case of the missing marble," Nancy said. "No, that's not what I meant. Will you confront Rhonda about the evidence?" "Oh," Nancy sank down under her bed. "I have to think about it. Rhonda should have just told me. I would have been mad, but not that mad."